A very good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this 80th edition of the Together for Education webinars brought to you by Notebook. Week after week, we have had the privilege of hosting you and some wonderful thought leaders, various esteemed educators, discussing a variety of topics. We have gone across the curricular, the co-curricular, and the extracurricular, diving into topics of mental health, sports, and various aspects part of our schooling system. For your love and support for this particular event over so many months, we thank you. Today, we look at something very interesting. We look at how we are breaking hardware barriers in our education system. A short history lesson first. Back during the Second World War, military scientists started designing this device that could help predict the trajectories of artillery shells. By the time this device was finally switched on in November 1945, the war was actually over. This device and was considered a marvel for its time. It had 17,468 vacuum tubes that blew out every couple of days. It took up 1,800 square feet of warehouse space and weighed more than 25 tons. Per second. Now let's look at phone 6, which weighs about 4.5 ounces, just around 2 kilos or so, and computes 25 billion instructions per second. That, ladies and gentlemen, has been the journey of computing hardware over these last few decades. This hardware is now part of our education system. EdTech, smart classes, devices within the classroom and outside are a reality now. And today we shall take a look at the various aspects of how new technology has helped us overcome various hardware barriers that were there in the education system before. To talk about this, our first speaker today is Mr. Philip Barrett. Mr. Barrett retired as the Deputy Headmaster from the illustrious Doon School in Dehradun after 44 years of serving in education across various institutions. Mr. Barrett served the Doon School as Housemaster, Head of Department, Dean of Activities, Dean of Student Welfare, Deputy Headmaster, Second Master, and Acting Headmaster with great distinction. He also carried out a visioning exercise for the Doon School in the year 2011 through an in-depth study of a number of British public schools and various schools in the US. He qualified as a leadership trainer at Wellington College, UK in the year 2000. He is also an athlete, an adventurer, and a naturalist. Sir, privileged to have you with us. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Shubhayu. I hope I'm visible and audible enough.
Yes, sir, perfectly. Thank you.
I'm getting poor connectivity today for some reason, so I hope I can be online throughout. So a very good evening to the entire Notebook team, Achin, Shubhayu, Abhishek, Megha, and the rest of you. Also our esteemed panelists and our guests who tuned in. So today's topic I thought was very vast and very wide, and I didn't know which part exactly I would like to strike at. So I thought I'd take you through some of my early days with computers and how computers came into my life and to my school, and some of the problems we face in this whole absorption of hardware into our lives. So this was in the 80s in Delhi when computers first arrived into my school, and we had a computer room which was fully air conditioned, and we had to tiptoe past this facility. It resembled a Star Trek control room. And I think by the mid 80s, computers started appearing in most schools in India. And we had a subject called computer science. But these big gadgets, bulky gadgets, were mainly used for office administrative purposes because the internet hadn't come in as yet. And so, as a teaching and learning resource, computers still had years to go. The only real hardware that the children used was the Casio calculator, which was used by the maths and physics students. So today, in the 60s when I was in school, the only hardware we had was a blackboard, chalk, and a duster that got thrown to us very, very often. Today, a normal school has a plethora of hardware, from smartphones to laptops, palm tops, desktops, floppy disks, pen drives, and various peripherals like USBs, monitors, printers, thin clients, CD readers, speakers, headsets, audiovisual equipment, projectors, 3D printers, Xerox machines, digital cameras, music stereos, amplifiers, mixers, scanners, calculators, slide projectors, Kindles, tape recorders, CC cameras, card readers for library use in the main gate, and digital barcoding scanners at the library and stationery shop. I mean, the list goes on. All these are with schools today. Even the smallest schools have many of these hardware gadgets. Now, fast forward to about 15 years, and computers and a lot of hardware started creeping into my life in the 90s, starting with a bulky Nokia phone. And then I promised myself that my children who were growing up then should have a computer, and they must get savvy with this computer before they left school. So I bought a 45,000 rupees bulky Acer desktop that I couldn't even switch on. But the children learned to play games on it, FIFA 2000 being the most popular. And then very gradually we got into email and making lists and making class lists while the kids were all over the place downloading music, movies, and doing much more than we were doing. Now, very imperceptibly, machines started getting smaller and more numerous in schools. The bulky stereo speakers and the huge desktops gave way to the tiny Bose speakers and the slim laptops. And very soon, the new school that I moved into in the 80s had a computer room and computers in the library. It had printers attached so that children and teachers could take out printouts, download study materials. There were almost 400 desktops in the school, which boasts of only 500 students and 70 staff. And what was the biggest problem that we faced in absorption of hardware? And I think the problem was the conflict between students on the one hand, who cried out for more hardware, cell phones, laptops, pen drives, floppy disks, dongles, and the staff who said no, who wanted textbooks, exercise books, and neater handwriting. And very reluctantly, we had to give in to these students over time. I mean, the writing was on the wall. This had to come in, but I don't know why the staff kept blocking their demand for more time, more hardware. Now, the staff called for regular and periodical inspection of laptops. They wanted bigger and better firewalls that censored what the children watched. And this quarrel continued right up to the mid 2010. Now, the students wanted to move into a 20th century learning situation and train for a 20th century workplace. While the teachers were afraid of the kids misusing the internet and hardware and looking at wrong websites, and they pulled them back to a 19th century education and training that they were familiar with. And what I could see was that the staff were fighting against an ever-growing flood of student pressure, and they could not hold out for too long. Eventually, before I left the school teaching job, we had over 350 desktops scattered all over school. And this is not private laptops. This was a school-owned desktops. We had 24/7 connectivity, and all seniors from class 9 upwards had laptops. They also had iPods and personal music systems, amongst other things. Cell phones, of course, we kept out, and we fought a losing battle against cell phones. But cell phones were a no-no. Now, the question is, do we need so much hardware around? Now, if you look at Professor Sugata Mitra and his study called The Hole in the Wall, it shows that personal machines are not that useful. He proposed that groups of little children between 5 and 6 could learn much more and do much more positive work if they sat around one computer. Having personal laptops had its own problems. They led to children playing less sports. They sprawled out on their beds. I'm talking about boarding schools. Many children got overweight and obese. The doctors indicated this. There was less bullying, of course, because seniors were too busy watching movies. There was less coaching of juniors by seniors, that mentoring that goes on in schools because they were too busy with their laptops. Of course, there was less paperwork and textbooks because they used email and online texts. Library visits dwindled because Kindles came to their room. Now, in my travels, I saw two schools. One was a school called the Mahendra World College in Pune, near Pune, a fabulous IB school. And what I learned there was that the children sat and actually decided that they would not have private machines, personal laptops. They decided to go for a computer room, which would be open for a longer period of time, so that they could use that room if they wanted to study. And in their dormitories, they would socialize, they would talk more. On the other hand, I visited a school called Groton near Boston in the US, where every single student of the 300 in school had laptops supplied by the Dell company and serviced by an in-service department in school. And these are two contrasting figures. One was where they opted to not have personal machines, and the other where every child had a laptop. Now, the jury is still out on whether more laptops make for better learning. Private machines did not lead to much academic performance. Yes, kids did other things on them, but schoolwork and research was minimal. By 2015, hardware began appearing in the classrooms, which were totally revamped in my school. They were modern classrooms, modern features. Everyone could plug in his computer, a colored screen, blackboards, whiteboards, projectors, and the such. Now, is so much hardware needed? We are coming to a time when it will be impossible to stop the children demanding more hardware. And a time is going to come when just a smartphone is all they need to do their homework and assignments on. Teaching and interaction will maybe in class, but as the pandemic lockdown has shown, schools may be running for 3 to 4 days in a week. We may have blended classrooms, and children may do much more work sitting at home. And this is where the hardware, just a handheld device, may be just sufficient for the modern school kid to learn. Just as we have office spaces disappearing in the market and people working from home, I think likewise, children will do much more work from home. This is made possible by hardware. Now, with the world moving to artificial intelligence, virtual reality, and robotics, hardware in the classrooms are needed, and those schools that hold out against these devices will sadly be left behind. India is the largest growing market for audiovisual equipment in the classroom, and even we will fall behind if we don't use these aids. What are some of the other barriers to hardware absorption? I think distance. In many of our rural areas in India, and India is a large country, many of our rural remote areas, hills and deserts, it's difficult to buy these equipment because of the outlets. Now, Australia, I know, is a country, because of its vastness, has benefited by online learning, and schools in the outback have the best hardware. Another barrier would be cost to school and families, because these are costly gadgets. Lack of technical support in schools. Technical support is very important because these machines need servicing, they break down. We had a person at the Doon School campus who was almost like a friend to us, who was there 24/7. And he serviced our machines, tackled our problems. He was a part of the teaching community. The other barrier would be stubborn and outdated education systems that we have to deal with. Teachers and heads of schools with fixed mindsets, curriculums that are outdated, unchallenging syllabuses, which stick to rote learning, and so they don't push children to go to that internet and therefore the hardware. Teaching methods eventually depend on the exam styles. Exams that test for rote just need talk and chalk and nothing else, maybe notes. But exams that ask for creativity and for creative thinking would lead students to more research-based learning. There's also the fear of misuse. There's a fear that teachers feel they'll be redundant with more hardware. and that the children will be able to use these gadgets more than us. Some schools, let's be fair, may not be able to afford hardware. And so if we allow hardware to come in, there would be inequality in the classrooms, the haves and the have-nots. Internet connectivity is another thing. And of course, the rapidly evolving market, which leaves these devices outdated in a short space of time. So a hardware needs to be upgraded and modernized, just like cameras and TVs get outdated and obsolete so rapidly. I think computer labs need also to have the machines replaced periodically. And there's so much variety in the shape of hardware out there in terms of projectors and what have you, that it's difficult for school heads and teachers to decide on what is the best for that school. And having invested in something, then I think that would have to stay for some period of time before changes take place. And what is the future going to look like? I think all schools need to introduce computers and all sorts of learning hardware and budget for this constant upgradation that I spoke about. The other thing is that schools should learn to do big things with the limited resources they have. And I was reading about a school in Canada that is collecting and comparing their carbon footprints using algebra to calculate the best, just using computers. And they didn't have sophisticated machines. There was another school that used algebra to calculate the best cell phone plans to determine the best value and then sharing this with the folks in town. So children were solving real issues and real problems. Teachers need to overcome their fear of the unknown and learn with students. We have to drop that ego and start learning with the students. And in the end, I think we all have to get savvy. Easy access to hardware is important, and teachers must be encouraged to experiment, not through courses and workshops. That doesn't do it. But I think teachers need to be allowed to experiment, do things for themselves, get into teacher support groups, like a buddy system, where teachers learn from each other and get more comfortable with hardware. And with that, I think I may have tackled something of this hardware issues, and I hope it's been of some use. Over to you, Shubai.
Thank you so much, sir. There were unfortunately a few network drop-offs in the middle, but I think the message was very clearly conveyed. Trust either need to play a role that the day we talk about hardware barriers is the day we have network drop-offs. Well, ladies and gentlemen, after this, we have our second speaker today. Our next speaker is Achin Bhattacharya. Achin is the founder and CEO at Notebook. A chartered accountant by training, Achin was a director at Deloitte prior to starting Notebook. He has worked in India and abroad in various senior capacities in GE, PwC, KPMG, and Deloitte. He is a fellow of the ICAI and a member of CP Australia. He is also the recipient of the prestigious Indian Achievers Award. Achin is an avid reader and a passionate traveler with keen interests in economics, history, literature, and philosophy. He is a regular speaker at various forums and chambers of commerce and also contributes articles to numerous publications regularly. He is also on the board of some of the most renowned corporates and contributes significantly to their brand strategies. Achin, over to you.
Good evening, everyone. Shubha, I am audible?
Yeah, Achin, loud and clear.
I once again welcome all of you to today's session on a topic which to me signifies the changing world order, generational shift, and refusing to get demoralized with challenges, but rather treating them as opportunities to make a bigger and more sustainable impact, which will ensure an indelible footprint of the winds of change. According to Nobel laureate Amartya Sen, the purpose of development, The purpose of development is to improve human lives by expanding the range of things that a person can be and do, such as be healthy and well nourished, knowledgeable, and an active citizen. So, development is about removing obstacles to what a person values and can do in life. Obstacles such as illiteracy, bad health, lack of access to resources, or lack of civil and political freedoms. Thus, in Sen's words, it's about increasing human capabilities and removing barriers to these capabilities. It's four broad strategic objectives. You know, if you look at what Amartya Sen said, first and foremost, improving the quality of teaching and learning. Uh, and again, considering the fact that we're discussing the education sector, also improve management for efficiency within the sector. Improve access and participation. Thus, any barriers to access, any barriers which causes any kind of hindrance to access to digital education, quality education, removing them and ensuring that the access improves. And the moment there's access of larger number of people, naturally participation goes up. And decentralize the education management system. There's a great deal of research that I was going through in this particular topic, and some of them are very interesting. Now, if you look at various barriers to education, before getting restricted to the topic, if you look at it from a more holistic perspective, throughout the world, poverty is the most pervasive barrier to education. And often, other factors, it really excavates the other factors that keep children from attending school and learning. However, some of the other prevalent barriers, apart from poverty, if I say, as we discussed earlier, is any kind of hindrance or lack of access. Now, coming to the role of technology in education, the effective use of digital learning tools in classrooms, as we will all agree, can increase student engagement, help educators to improve teaching quality, lesson plans, and also facilitate personalized learning. Here, what is really important is that we all agree that in the larger educational ecosystem, and when we're discussing about digital education, that's only one component, I'll say. If you look at the entire ecosystem, everything, be it buildings, classroom, laboratories, equipment, education infra, are crucial elements of learning environment in schools and even higher education institutes like universities, colleges. And there is strong evidence and there are researches that has proved that high quality infra facilitates better instruction, improves student outcome, and reduces dropout rates, among other benefits. Now, coming to when we discuss about, because I was going through this topic, and some very interesting facts came to the light. So, before moving to hardware or digital, again, if you take a step back, any design of educational infra, if you look at the fundamentals or basics of any design that affects educational infra, there are three interrelated factors, and I believe all of these are interrelated to each other. First of all, naturalness, like for instance, the quality of light, the quality of air. Second, stimulation. Does it really stimulate the learning ambience, environment, like factors like color, complexity, and third, individualization. Like how flexible is the learning space depending on needs? Can we really customize the space, or how can we make it individual to ensure that needs are met? Although educational policymakers have been increasingly focusing on the quality of education and learning environment in schools. I was going through some reports and after a lot of surveys that have happened, some of them done by UNESCO, some by UNDP, many countries use a fragmented or piecemeal approach when it comes to investing in their education infra. And we'd all agree that poor infrastructure conditions make students feel negatively about school. Negative perception of the school's social climate contributes to a higher absenteeism. Naturally, students are demotivated, which in turn contributes to low test outcomes, test scores, and poor academic achievement. Now, when we discuss these factors, a very strong argument that very often comes to the forefront is even with meager resources, even with very little resources, there are many people who have done exceedingly well. But if you look at today's time and considering the winds of change, the need of the hour, there's a very beautiful and apt proverb in Ghana, which says, and the literal meaning of it, which is, not everyone has been adult before, but everyone has been a child before. So this could be interpreted in different ways. A very simple interpretation means that every adult at some point of time was a child, but not necessarily vice versa. So it's very common that elders or grown-ups would say, and in order to claim seniority, that to a child that I have been young, but you have never been old. But in today's age, youngsters can reply, you never have been young in the world I am young in, and you never can be. So considering the challenges in today's world, considering the complexities, naturally requirements in terms of educational outcomes that we are trying to optimize, and consequential needs in terms of infra. So when we discuss about infra, we discuss about a larger picture, as I was telling you. For instance, imagine not being able to hear at a crowded event, say as a loud social networking event. Now, naturally, if you look at things from a student's perspective, from a child's perspective, it's really important that educational infra that in schools and higher education institutions needs to be comfortable. And there are various other factors as well. For instance, when we are discussing about lack of access, now we are discussing about lack of access to content. So if you take a step back and discuss about lack of access to campuses and student facilities, for instance, specially able students on wheelchairs or using crutches definitely require places to study and work. And is the classroom configuration flexible enough to cater to their needs? Like we were discussing about flexibility a while back. For example, typical classroom setup with workstations, etc. How does it really accommodate differently able students? Now, these are very important factors, right? Coming to technology, in digital ed, updated technology can give students the advantage of, say, the latest software, studying tools, or access to online encyclopedias, while whiteboards allow students to draft their thoughts in ways that sometimes can't be elaborated in a normal blackboard or typing in a word processor. Now, it's really important that when it comes to infra also, it keeps pace with the development. For example, some furniture solutions have built-in power and USB outlets to ensure students can plug in their tablets or laptops and study without interruption. Now, these are really important, right? Like coming to technology, since we were discussing about it, writing notes on a chalkboard isn't enough for a student to retain the lesson. Say students with visual, hearing, mobility or learning impairments may need printouts or presentation slides after the class. Sometimes very often available on a shared student portal. In fact, this level of resource is becoming increasingly common for, especially in higher education, for high school and colleges. Another very important aspect is keeping students stress-free. How do we look at an anxious-free classroom? How do we make the entire thing stress-free? So I was looking at some research that has happened in the University of Southern California in Los Angeles. And this research goes on to prove that vast lecture halls at times are intimidating. So thus, the university's art division very consciously kept this in mind. And they have chosen to go with smaller batch sizes, smaller classrooms. Now, there are campuses with small classroom sizes, beanbag chairs, raised sitting allows for a space that really reduces anxiety and make it easy to ask questions and retain lecture information. Any visually cluttered space with many objects lying around can pose safety risks. Thus, avoiding excess furniture, material equipment, and allowing space for specially able students, those on wheelchairs, etc., and those who need assistance is the need of the hour. Again, differently floored textures, like for example, providing good contrast in furnishing, walls, floors can assist students with little or no functional vision, those who are visually impaired. Using different floored textures can provide students with extra tactile clues. Thus, we are discussing about a more inclusive learning environment as a whole. Now, coming to the audiovisual learning part that we were discussing, as Bharat sir mentioned, and I think sir really explained the chronology and sequence of events very well. You know, going by his practical experience very well. If I may add just a few points here, audiovisual really has a long history in India. So in fact, it can be traced to the launch of Indian National Satellite, INSAT, in 1980, and its availability for educational purposes. So which at that point of time led the Ministry of Education to take over the production of educational television programs for transmission via Doordarshan. And we are discussing about 1980, right? 30 years back. Now, 40 years back. Now, today, with today's population explosion, technology is the only means to make education accessible to as many as possible. Now, today in 21st century, we will all agree that information societies really need independently and creatively thinking individuals who can solve problems and manage their learning processes. But this also needs schools which will actually educate these individuals. Now, I was going through a UNESCO research, a very beautifully documented, which goes on to say that policymakers realized this fact and understood the necessity that information and communication technologies should be effectively included in education system. So this was the background with regard to ICT coming in. Thus, information and communication technologies, as we would all agree, then again there are two parts, like hardware and software. Now, what very often happens is that when we discuss about this entire ecosystem, when we discuss about the entire digital classrooms or ICT, we don't discuss it as in components, we don't discuss in compartments, right? We discuss as a whole. Because integration means unification into a whole. Thus, integration of ICT is not a product, but a process. And as also many researchers and evidences have proved time and again. Because integration of ICT into schools means using ICT effectively and efficiently in all dimensions. So whether that be providing necessary infra, teachers training, ensuring that the learning environment is good enough. Now there are a lot of researchers. Now coming to why we chose today's topic, because I was going to a lot of researches that has happened all over the world with the objective of identifying that what are the barriers affecting the integration of ICT. And I'm not discussing about researchers in our country alone. So many of them are global researchers in different parts of the world. That what is it that has been a stumbling block? What are the challenges? Now, for incidentally, they are going to a study which was held in 26 countries, which has found that the basic barriers faced in integration of ICT, it has zeroed in on two barriers. First, hardware, and second, inadequate spending or inadequate involvement in teachers' training. So two key areas it is identified. A, need of ensuring that hardware very often acts as a barrier, and the other being teachers' training. Now again, other factors like, for example, technical support or lack of content not being good enough, etc., also comes in. Access to technology, technological changes, upgradation very often happening. Again, another research that happened in Europe, European SchoolNet, again speaks on similar lines. Very similar findings. Apart from hardware, other factors that were highlighted. One of them was low motivation for using new technologies. And when it says low motivation, not only on the part of educators, but all stakeholders. Again, hardware very strongly was projected as one of the principal barriers. Incidentally, many studies were combined, and in 2007, there was a study done by UNESCO which combined 48 such studies all over the world, and it identified 123 barriers. 123 barriers were identified. That at K-12 level, what are the barriers when it comes to implementing ICT? And the results of the study categorize these barriers as: first, resources; second, knowledge and skills; third, institution; fourth, attitude and beliefs; and fifth, assessment and subject culture. Again, if we look here, the first and foremost barrier which it highlighted was resources. So when I drill down, again, hardware was something that was highlighted. Now, they found that ICT integration is directly affected by attitude and belief of all stakeholders. And very often, hardware costs, continuous maintenance, upgradation challenges, etc. came in. A lack of resources, and ultimate outcome was negatively affected. Now, I think when we began today's session, Shubha will get a very nice backdrop with regard to where this is coming from. And we would all agree that gradually, as things have moved along, things have become much more simpler with regard to hardware. So the focus very much now is on end outcome and on ensuring that learning outcomes are optimized with minimum usage or minimum investment in hardware. Again, on similar lines, another one of the very interesting researches that happened in Turkey. Now, in this particular research, I was going through a questionnaire that they had sent out. Now, this questionnaire was sent out to 227 schools. Now, these 227 schools in Turkey had at least one ICT classroom. So that was the criteria. And there were around 2,270 teachers and and 227 principals, one principal for each school, naturally. And data was collected. The whole objective was that there was a mail questionnaire. Now, this questionnaire, there are two different varieties, one for teachers and the other for school principals. Now, to assure that the questionnaires were adequately designed to collect sufficient data to answer the questions, they are validated by global experts in ICT. Also, a sample of 140 teachers were taken, apart from these 227 schools, 140 teachers from other schools. So this instrument, it had three parts. One was, the end objective was to assess general characteristic of the participant. Second, items to identify. And third, again, what are the barriers? How to identify the barriers? Now, what are the result of this survey? Now, the result of the survey is that both school administrators, teachers were asked to rank the barriers they face during integration of ICT into their own individual teaching learning process. So, for example, these are 10 barriers. They were asked to rank them in orders of importance. That, how and how much you're being affected by this individual barrier. Again, they identified lack of training and lack of hardware as the most important barriers when it comes to ICT. Again, lack of technical support also came in, but hardware was something which was highlighted. So I think across the world, it has been seen that when it comes to the entire, because if you look at it from a more mature perspective, see, at the end of the day, hardware is only a medium. The objective is to transmit knowledge, because basics of education will never change, be it digital or be it face-to-face education. The end objective is to ensure that a educator's teaching, explanation, thought-provoking sessions reach the intended recipient. And the hardware is nothing but an intermediary, it's a medium. But very often we have seen that the medium has been an impediment in delivering learning outcomes. Hence, I think in today's age, there's no doubt about it that hardware requirements have been simplified like anything. Normal handheld devices are good enough, individual devices. And winds of change, even in institutions, definitely things have been simplified with an objective that end outcomes should be optimized. So these are a few things that I wanted to highlight. I thank all of you for giving me a patient hearing. We have a very experienced and wonderful panel today. And I look forward to their views on this very important topic. Over to you, Shubhai.
Thank you, Achin. Thank you for that wonderful presentation. Today's topic is especially close to our hearts at Notebook. When we started out, one of the reasons for us to exist that we identified was that a lot of the smart class solutions or in-school solutions that existed depended upon hardware that was obsolete, and as a result could not create as much of an impact. We at Notebook try to bridge the gap between classroom and home since the day one of our existence, which is why we call ourselves the After School app. What Notebook does is it offers short videos tailored to the school curriculum for use within the classroom by the teachers. If you're taking a class, you might want to play a short notebook video as an introduction to your lesson. Months later, or maybe even that very evening, when the student goes home and wants to revise the topic, they have access to those same videos on their personal devices. Hence, access to hardware never becomes a barrier to their education. What I'm going to do now is give you a small sneak peek, a behind the scenes video of what we do at Notebook and what is the outcome.
नोटबुक में आपका स्वागत है। इस नए वीडियो को आपके सामने प्रस्तुत करते हुए हमें बेहद खुशी हो रही है। हमारा उद्देश्य है परंपरागत शिक्षा को आधुनिक तरीके से पेश करना, ताकि हमारी ये नई पीढ़ी या आप सभी कहीं भी कभी भी इसे आसानी से पढ़ सकें।
Hello students, today we are going to study the story Madam Rides the Bus, written by Valli.
The king, Louis XVI, had come to power in 1774 at only 20 years of age. The king helped the 13 American colonies gain independence from Britain.
Curly brown hair turning permanently black. If you memorize this line, it will help you remember the ratios all your life. How? Let's see. Some people have is a way of remembering sine is equal to perpendicular by hypotenuse. Provides energy for everything you do throughout the day. Next is the nucleus, the brain of the cell. This is where all the secrets are stored. Why do you think you have black eyes as your parents? Aha! Thank the nucleus.
Whoa, what is this? We are gonna drown.
Don't worry, you're not going to drown. This is the cytoplasm.
Sometimes, a fully grown individual, such as hydra or planaria or starfish, can give rise to a complete individual from its body parts. Isn't this interesting?
नोटबुक में आप सभी का पुनः स्वागत है।
Well, ladies and gentlemen, that was a bit about Notebook. Thank you for bearing with us there. And it is time for me to introduce the wonderful panel that we have for you today. We have with us Mr. Rajendra Malwal, who is presently working as the principal with Bhagwati International School, Patan. Mr. Malwal hails from Uttarakhand and is a postgraduate in English with specialization in American literature. He also possesses a master's degree in public administration along with a postgraduate diploma in education management and administration. He has been the head of English department with prestigious schools of the country like Gyanasthali and Birla schools. He has even served one of the international players in the educational area, the Aga Khan Education Service India, an agency of Aga Khan Development Network France, as a senior school principal. During his teaching career, which spreads to more than 2 decades, he has been involved in different aspects of school administration. He received the letter of appreciation, from the Ministry of Human Resources Development, Government of India, for excellent academic achievement of the institution under his able leadership. Sir, thank you so much for being a part of the panel today. We also have with us Mr. Swaminathan K. He is a principal of the Delhi Public School International in Uganda, East Africa. He is a well-known educationist with more than 16 years of experience in school education sector. He started his career as a science teacher in 2004 and continued to grow as coordinator, vice principal, and then principal. He moved to Uganda and joined DPS International in 2016, which is the only CBSE school in all of Uganda. He has been a district champion in athletics during his school and college days and strongly believes that sports help develop various skills amongst children. Sir, thank you so much for making the time for the panel today. Well, I will stop my share now, switch on our cameras so that we can all see each other and start the discussion.
Good evening, Mr. Sohaib.
Good evening, sir. Pleasure to see you.
Good evening, Mr. Swaminathan. Yeah, and other members.
Mr. Malwal, sir, if I may come to you first.
Yes, sir.
Today's topic, I'm sure
Yeah, I'm first of all very thankful to Notebook team for selecting me as one of the panelists, and I really endorse with the topic and appreciate the wisdom of the team for selecting such an interesting topic at the right time, especially the hardware and all. These are the times when we decide for the next year. So I'm very sure that after listening to honorable members of the panel, especially Mr. Barrett and Mr. Archin, that the people in the panel will surely, or especially among the audience, if they are into the leadership position, will have an eye-opening experience whether the investment they have planned is right. And secondly, with the intrusion of mobile, I think that utility of hardware, especially if we talk about in a school sense, the computer systems, especially the old pattern PCs, the utility is really reducing, is diminishing day by day. Why? Because children don't need those PCs at home. Why? Because they have mobile phones, especially the smart devices, which replace, and even for us also, most of the time you will see that the use of laptops and PC is being reduced, because most of the functions, most of the jobs, especially email and surfing, is done through our smartphones. So now the question arises for especially the school heads and school managements and sponsors. Then when the utility is reducing, why should we increase our investments? Simply because this is the parental expectation. This is because a kind of parental attitude or the attitude of the management to display that they have this many number of PCs in the school. As a driving school, if a driving school has 200 students, 200 learners, they cannot buy 200 cars or 200 motor vehicles to train them. Similarly, we need to learn from such organizations that if learners are more, does not mean that facility need to be increased. So we need to go for maximum utilization of resources. So we need to see how we can increase utilization. As Mr. Bharat suggested, that we can have peer groups who can share resources. Like if you see in a case of schools, especially the schools having students approx 1,000 or maybe little more, they require minimum 2 labs, 2 big rooms simply for these PCs, when simply a handheld device can manage. So why should we invest? And it is really a great deal of waste of resources. So there is a need to change this attitude that having maximum PCs cannot improve learning outcomes. These days, especially when notebooks like apps are available or resources are available, and there are plenty of many. So once we are having smart classrooms, so I don't think that there is a separate lab with many number of PCs is required. And secondly, it is not only costing money, it is costing space also. Space is very important, especially in bigger cities. So the rooms being used for laboratories can be utilized for some other reasons. So both way, I feel that it is required. And similarly, I appreciate the way the trend is changing now. So I hope that people will realize, especially the educators will realize, that it is not that important having many number of PCs. So we need to ensure that this trend is realized even by the parents and the students also. Now these days, if you see, even this is the admission time, and we being into education, we look at the advertisement of different schools being shared, being even broadcast on the TV. What is the main focus? That there is a computer lab with 50 sets of personal computers. There are 2 labs. There are different other labs where different number of PCs are there. So I feel that this shows lack of wisdom. So instead of that, if we can minimize these resources, instead of that fund, which is really very important, can be invested somewhere else. So this is what I would like to speak on this topic right now, and already sir has shared, so I agree with all of them.
Wonderful, sir. Wonderful. Mr. Swaminathan, if we may come to you. So your experience with hardware in the various schools where you worked.
Yeah. Good evening to one and all.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening, sir.
Really, it was very good and informative session. Sorry, my voice may be a little bit low. Please adjust with that. As the panelists have been addressing, technology has stepped in a lot. Okay, with technology, I wish to address 4 things. First one is TG, technology generation. So we have stepped into the technology generation. Second one, to live or to succeed or to survive properly in this generation, we need a TL, technology literacy. Third one, students are the learners of this generation. They need a TQ, that is technology quotient. And last but not the least, the teachers who are going to teach this technology generation students, they should be having TET qualification. It is not teachers eligibility test. It is technologically equipped teachers. So these 4 things matters very much. That is TG, TL, TQ, and TET. When it comes to the technology involvement or updation into the education sector, as many members, many eminent members have been addressing, I strongly believe that the future of education is going to be blended. No more it is going to be a single form of system, or like the traditional form of schooling system where the kids come to school, attend the classes, then they get the notes in the school, they copy down the notes given by the teachers. Those things will definitely reduce. And even our organization which is conducting this seminar today, notebook, you have to change as e-notebook, because the contents are going in online nowadays. Even in our school, DPS Uganda, what is the future plan? If you see, we are going to step into the blended method of education. Okay, we are not going for a paid software or something. We are going to use Google Classroom. Okay, by doing that, what we are going to do, or what we have planned to do, if you see the traditional system, teachers teach the lesson and then they write the question answer on the notebook, on the blackboard or on the smart board, then the students copy down. So if a teacher is spending like 4 hours to teach the lesson, they have to spend at least another 1 hour or 1.5 hours to give the notes or the question answers or whatever it is. Now what we are going to do, we are going to make it as a soft copy and load it in the Google Classroom. So by doing that, we will be able to save a lot of time. And this time could be used in a very quality way by the teachers to increase the learning experience, to increase the teaching practice in different folds. So they can involve different methods of teaching, and the students also can be involved in various activities which will help their learning process. And it will not stop here alone. Even during the tough times, for example, if a cyclone is there or something is there, still the education can go on. The school will function. It is not that like earlier days, if you see before some 3-4 years, okay, cyclone is there, for next 4 days, government declares holiday. Now it is not like that. Immediately the school will switch over to online. Regular school, online school, regular classes, online classes. It's going to happen. This is the future what is going to be there in the school education sector also. And coming to the hardware side, if you see into the hardware side, I can say even the textbooks can be considered as one of the main thing, because most of the time parents will be keeping on complaining, my child is carrying such a huge bag, it's heavy, right? Now what is going to happen? In maybe another 5-6 years, textbooks will be done away, I think so. Textbooks will be there, but in the form of e-books. Even if you see nowadays, the publishers have started to talk, sir, the sale of textbook is reducing. Students are not that much interested to buy the textbooks, especially the textbooks which is common like NCERT textbooks, because they are available in PDF form, free access. They can download anywhere, they can print it, they can just view it in their mobile phone, they can see in their laptop, desktop, whatever it is. So things have started to change. Same way notebooks, it is also going to reduce. It is going to be as e-notebooks. Students will have all the contents with them. So all these changes are reducing the hardwares. I'm not talking only about the technology hardwares, even the other hardwares I'm saying. It is going to reduce. And it is good. We have to take it in the right aspect. This COVID has caused 3 C's. First one is it caused a lot of challenges. Second one, that challenges caused a lot of creativity in eminent persons. This creativity has brought some new things which have brought in some new changes. And some of the changes are going to be permanent and some are temporary. And one of the permanent changes which I feel is incorporation of technology into the education. And not only that, technology has its own advantage in finance part also. The school management can wisely plan by incorporating the technology into their schooling system. And even for learners, if you see, again, why I am underlining the blended education, because technology cannot replace the teachers. It is impossible. Teachers cannot be replaced, but teachers who are not technologically equipped will be replaced definitely. There is no doubt. If teachers are having that kind of recurrent towards learning something new and adapting to the new changes, definitely they are going to have very tough time, because the youngsters, those who are coming up nowadays, they have vast knowledge in technology. So these youngsters may replace the experienced ones who are not ready to change their mindset or change their method of teaching process. So updation is very much essential. That's what they keep on saying. Struggle for existence and survival of the fittest. This technology world, we have to keep on struggling. We have to equip ourselves. Then only we will be able to survive. So this is my view.
Thank you so much, sir. Rajendra sir, if I may come to you next. One of the things that we have found very surprising is the classical models that have existed for school-based online learning or school-based audiovisual learning. The pricing was always based on hardware, right? We classically see people buying a number of smart classes for that matter, and content has taken a backseat. Whereas when you talk to any educator, content is most important, right?
100%.
This is so with mobiles now becoming slowly that personal learning device. Do you think content will gather more importance? It will get the importance it
100%.
deserves?
It is because of the content only that hardware is important. Why do schools buy hardware? Not for the sake of buying hardware, but it is because of the content that will be delivered. That is through the software only. So there is no point of buying hardware simply because there's no content. So content or the software is the reason for buying the hardware. So once software is provided through some other mediums, I'm sure that hardware will lose importance, and as it is doing now. Now these days the concepts of computer labs, especially in bigger and modern day schools, are is taking backseat.
So continuing from that thought, do you think like schools have actively stopped students from bringing mobile phones into the school? Do you think that is going to change?
100%, sir. It will surely change. As going back to again, Mr. Barrett, he said that in some of the schools they have started. Of course, it may not be mobile phone, because mobile. When we say phone simply seems as if it is an instrument for communicating, especially talking and all. So it may not be exactly the mobile right now, but there will be some devices similar to mobile where maybe talking and other negative elements which disturb teaching learning will be removed, but there will be some new substitute. People like technologically smart people like you will surely bring some new change and new equipment, and that will be replacing these hardwares. So it may be right now we haven't seen that, so we cannot say it will be mobile, but it may be similar equipment which may have lesser negative impact on studies and more on positive side. So I'm very sure that it is going to replace. It will replace this computer lab. It will replace the need of hardware, and it may replace to a great extent the people who are not able to use that technology, as Mr. Swaminathan said a few minutes back.
Wonderful, sir. Swaminathan, sir, you live in a very interesting area. East Africa has a very strange affinity for mobiles, right? They had they leapfrogged the entire TV stage of technology development and got straight into mobiles. They jumped 2G and 3G, went straight into 4G. Sir, how do you see the mobile usage growing? And would you say at some point you would make that part of your school system?
I would say that it should not be the normal mobile device which they are using for communication also. For example, if you see before 4 years, before I moved to Uganda, I have been using the tablet solutions of a company product called Extra Marks and even by some other suppliers also, which had only the education content inbuilt in them. Let it be the textbook, the question answers, the video links, videos, animated videos, everything is inbuilt. In fact, we have been calling that as e-classrooms. But we didn't allow the access in the normal mobile phones or in the Android mobile phones. Because allowing the mobile phones along with the education contents, the normal mobile phones will first cause distraction. Definitely distraction will be there. Exposure of inappropriate content also chances are there. Health hazards possibility is there. Cyberbullying may happen. Examination malpractices also may happen. Then some of them may not be able to offer that kind of pricing, that is cost of purchase and maintenance. Then security concerns are still there. It can be misused. Even fake information could be shared sometime. And at times, invalid educational resources also may come inside. So these kind of things are little bit risky when we go for a normal mobile phone which is having the education content. Once you decide you want to bring the education content into the mobile phone type of device, you better to go for a device, as Rajendra sir said, the device should be meant only for education purpose. It should be completely restricted with that need alone. It should not have the additional need of calling someone or messaging someone like that. Maybe the option could be given for messaging or interacting with the teachers. That is possible because already many schools are having the ERP system. If ERP system is incorporated into that, where the student is able to send a message to the teacher or to the principal or to the vice principal, or the parent is able to message. So ERP system with this tool, I mean with the e-contents, will be the best option for the future. In fact, I'm also looking for such one. We have ERP. At the same time, I'm looking for a service provider who have the e-contents. Then I have to look for the third one who can merge both ERP and e-contents and then come out with the best tablet solution which could be used even in the classrooms. So this is my view.
Sir, I'm not going to make a sales pitch while we are on the webinar, but I think we can have a conversation about content.
Sure, sir.
Mr. Malwal, sir, if I may come to you, the role of parents, I think, is very important now, right? Because now the access is there. I understand the point that Swaminathan sir was making about tabs. Unfortunate part of that is it made digital education very unaffordable. Tablet-based solutions, because obviously the providers had to add the cost of the tab to the cost of education, and naturally it went beyond the means of a lot of students. So, sir, with mobiles being used the way they are right now, unless a company decides to come up with a learning mobile, do you think parents have a role to play here? Sir, you're on mute. Malwal, sir, you're on mute.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, I couldn't get your question. You mean that parents' role in minimizing the misuse of mobile?
Correct. Minimizing the misuse of mobile.
Positive side of mobile. Of course, they have
both.
Role. Yeah, they have role on both the sides. It is parent like because most of the time I don't think that children will misuse mobile in the classroom in the presence of teachers. So chances are very minimum, rare minimum. But the negative side can be more influential when the children are at home, or they are not at home also. Maybe they are not supervised, especially after the school hours. It may be in the at home, or it may be outside somewhere away from home. So of course parents' role becomes very important. They not only can set examples through their own mobile use, but they also need to monitor when the children grow. So there can be different strategies. They can monitor that how this utility is being utilized or the facility is being utilized given to the child, or they can have tracking system, they can have monitoring system, they can set examples by the way they use themselves. Many a time it happens that we ask children not to use mobile while using mobile ourselves. So I don't think that that will be a worth example. So we can have certain strategy also to reduce misuse of mobile by setting some domestic rules at home. So maybe we can have some hours when technology should not be used, especially mobile should not be used at all, be it by the parent or be it by the child. Or we can have certain areas of the house where use of technology can be reduced completely. When I say technology, it means mobile here. Use of mobile, maybe at the study table, maybe at drawing room when family is seated, or maybe at the dining table, or maybe at public outing, so that family can decide when the mobile is being misused, especially the parents can decide. So rules can be decided. We can see that when the mobile is being used effectively or maybe conducive for the educational purpose, so we can allow the child to use mobile that time, and rest of the time we can ban. And supervision is really very important, especially when you are a parent of a growing child, especially at secondary or the senior secondary level. You need to check because they are very smart. And secondly, one more important thing, that parents need to be very smart at the use of mobile. When you are providing a smartphone to the child, you need to be smart first. Why? Because you'll be befooled easily. You'll not be able to check what the child is doing. He will show you some study material, at the same time he'll be somewhere else, maybe listening to the music and showing you some content which is related to the lesson. This is what children do. This is what we learn through the examples, looking at our own children, looking at our own student. So parents need to be very careful, and this is the age when they need to be supervised. And once smart phones are provided, being without getting smart, I'm sure that we will lose the children. So I feel that they have very important role, important than I can say. It is very important, very important.
Wonderful, sir. Mr. Swaminathan, sir, same question to you. How do you see the role of the parents here? Because as sir said, students are typically more tech savvy than the parents are.
So basically, if you see, not only into this era, always the parent involvement in the kids' education is very important. If you see, always we say that it is like a triangle. The triangle is formed by three. One is the student, one corner is the student, other corner is the parent, and third corner is the teachers. The parent and the teachers are the base, and they are trying to raise the students. So when it comes to this use of technology or care towards the kids, definitely the parents' involvement matters a lot. Because even during these online classes, during this pandemic, what has happened, let me tell you, most of the online discussions like this, which I addressed or which I have been listening to many educationists, the main thing is, when it started, everybody was thinking that it was a tough process, online education. After 2 months, they thought that, okay, online education can be a replacement for the regular schooling. All the teachers started to think that they are teaching the lessons properly, students are learning properly. Parents were thinking, my son or daughter is inside a room, they are closing the doors, they are always sitting in front of the screen, they are listening, these things. But now, after the last 2-3 months, if you see, once some of the students started to come back to school, okay, and once we conducted some test or examination based on that lessons which we covered through online, things changed completely. The teachers who have been saying that, sir, everything was fine, they started to reverse their statement. Sir, they have switched on the cameras and seated, but they didn't learn anything. When we distributed those papers or those mark statement to the parents really understood what has happened. The child was sitting in front of the laptop, parent was sitting behind the laptop, but what the child was saying, the parent was not aware. Sometimes the parents have left the kids inside the room and they have been listening to the voice of the teacher. That means the parent is also thinking that the kid is listening, but the kid was doing something else. So if it is going to be in this way, I mean, if the situation in such a way that the students are going to be at home and then attend the classes, then 100% not, it should be more than 100% involvement from the parent side. And it is not going to be easy because there are many parents who are into profession. They cannot sit along with the kids and keep on seeing what they are doing, what they are viewing in the screen or whatever it is. So parent involvement is very much essential. When it comes to the costing side or affordability wise, as we know, we can say like 40 to 50% of the parents, okay, 30% will be able to provide the device very easily with whatever income or financial parts what they have. Next 30% will do something, because for every parent the education of the child is very, very important. So they will give. What about the last 40%? It will be very hard for a particular percentage of parents to provide even a normal basic mobile phones or device which will help their child to get the proper education through online. So here parent involvement matters a lot. And if you want the education to be successful, we cannot remove the parent from the education thing. It should be always the triangle.
Wonderful, sir. I think this has been a fantastic discussion. Thank you so much for your sharing your views. I'm sure the entire audience must have benefited from listening to both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Achin, you will have to do the honors of the official vote of thanks. And I'm sure you have a tough job on your hands because you have quite a bit to thank for. Well, ladies and gentlemen, over to Achin for the vote of thanks.
Yeah, I think we really had a very insightful session and some very good discussion in a very seamless manner. So I was listening very carefully. So I think some very interesting points came in with years of experience that our esteemed panelists they brought to the table. Undoubtedly, only educators with decades of experience can come up with observations like this. So I think great session we had. Bharat sir, thank you so much for giving us a flying start. And I think very beautifully you mentioned. So you took us back on a time machine, and the entire journey, like starting from, I can very well imagine that first computer room, AC computer room with, as you aptly put, like the Star Trek control room. And from there, today where we are, must have been a very long and eventful journey. Thank you so much indeed, sir. Rajendra Malwal, sir, some very good points you made, sir, which I really appreciate. First and foremost, I think you very aptly discussed the point that at the end of the day, why is the hardware relevant? Hardware is relevant only because it is helping us access the content, right? Content is something, content is the king. Content is very important. In this regard, I think I also saw a question by Red Silva sir. And I think I completely agree with him when he said that not only hardware, but content also needs to be upgraded. And I am completely with you, sir, on that. In fact, that's the entire design philosophy that we at Notebook also believe in, that content cannot be static, it has to be dynamic, right? It's not like creating a online repository or online library, because based on students' feedback, based on the kind of response we get, because we keep on monitoring, like I tell you from my practical experience, we keep on monitoring our dashboard. Like, when you see the video views, we look at the Google dashboard, and if we see that a particular video, there is a drop off in between, because see, say for example, today with 10,000 plus videos, there are videos where we see, like say for example, there's a drop off. We start analyzing and we rework on that video and again get that up. And also a new pedagogical trend, sometimes great feedback that we get from esteemed educators like you on a particular topic. We try to incorporate it. So there's no end to learning, right? Anything which is good can be better, anything which is better can even improve. And the whole objective is to learn from each other. And that's the entire objective of this platform. So we always believe in it. And I completely agree with you, Da Silva sir, that yes, content also needs to be upgraded. No doubt about it. Not only hardware, but content needs to be upgraded. Rajendra sir, another great point you made, which I think really strikes a chord with all our esteemed educators that we have today evening in our forum, because many of us naturally wear two hats, one as educators and second also as parents. So I think what you said with regard to restricting technology access in either say time bound or some portions of the house, like say for example, no phones at the dinner table. I think so. These are really I think need of the hour, and not only for children. This is I think equally true for adults as well. It helps in reducing our stress level. It helps in family bonding, and I think it's really important. So I think thank you, sir, for some of your great insights. Swaminathan sir, thank you. Swaminathan sir, again, I think the way you explained the triangle, that really stays with us, and I'm sure with all our esteemed audience as well. Yes, indeed, sir. You're very correct that parents and teachers and all of us would agree on that are the base, and who really try to create a foundation on which the student can really grow. To nurture the student, to care for him or her, and ensure that they grow. Another I think very very important point you made, which I guess is the spirit of the evening, and that really stays with all of us, is the way you also highlighted the digital divide. Like meaning to say, what about the bottom 40%? Because 30% parents who can easily afford, 30% who really go out of their way but do it, because you rightly mentioned that education in India, the way we have always seen for middle class parents, is undoubtedly it's most probably most of the time it's highest in the list of priorities. Asking for a better life for our next generation, something that we have aspired for, and something which we want them to achieve. So I think you're completely correct, but the bottom 40%, that's really something I'm sure that all stakeholders of society, and it is our responsibility as a civil society to think about that as well. And the pandemic, in fact, has really highlighted this digital divide. It is really highlighted because we have seen homes with multiple devices, children having access to multiple devices. There's a laptop, there's a tab, there's a phone. And on the other hand, we have seen, families with one single smartphone that the breadwinner of the family carries, naturally for his or her job. And the child waits for the father to come back home, and then studies maybe in the evening for an hour or so. So, and also we have seen practically parents working from home. They're working from home, so naturally they're also in their own professional assignments, etc. At times it's difficult for them to share the devices with the children. But yes, that device sharing has happened during pandemic. So I'm completely with you on that this digital divide is something which is really important. We need to work on it. So I think some great points that all of you brought to the forefront. I thank all of you for being with us here today evening.
Thank you.
I also thank members of the esteemed audience for their time today, and we look forward to your continued support in the days to come. Thank you, take care, and goodbye.
Thank you, Achin. Good night.
Good night,
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.